Every one of those expectations of man up, suppress, you don't let the pressure out. Over time, if the pressure continues to build and build and build, ultimately, it'll just blow up.
What if the single biggest factor shaping your child's future success isn't the school they attend, the sports they play, or even the advice you give them, but the way you handle your own stress, anxiety, and emotional health every single day? Recent research shows that children are deeply affected by the emotional regulation and mental well being of their parents. Studies from organizations like the Harvard Center on the Developing Child and the American Psychological Association have found that parental stress, emotional availability, and mental health are significantly influence a child's emotional resistance, confidence, academic performance, and even long term physical health. Children don't just want what their parents listen. Children don't want to listen to what parents say. They absorb how parents react, cope, communicate, and recover from challenges. This episode explores why a father's emotional well being is one of the most powerful investments he can make in the future. That was a lot to read, but it's a heavy subject. So today we're going to be chatting about mental health in your child's future, why your well-being shapes theirs on the Dad Central show. And you are watching and listening to Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And as always, our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And right from the front end, we'd like to answer your questions about fatherhood during our show. So please feel free to email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. Drew, another interesting topic. That was a lot of reading to do, but it's important.
Yeah, hi, Ed. Apologize. My voice is a little bit worn out, so it might sound a bit different. But yeah, it's for me. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation, like with most of them. But this is a good one. It's a good one because I was just away for 2 days with a lot of other men over the course of a weekend, learning and actually growing in many of the topics that are part of this conversation. And it's really remarkable to me to hear, many men, many of them much older than I am, talk about the influence that their father was on them. And I don't necessarily mean positively. I mean, the impact throughout their life and some of the challenges that they experienced as a result of a father who wasn't able to do what we're going to be talking about helping fathers do today. And you see the widespread effects, and you hear it through their stories of how it's impacted the rest of their lives. And for that, it says to me, this is so important, so crucial. And when we get a hold of it, as well as all the men who are there talking about their own healing in this area and how powerful it's been for them and the difference it's made as they now engage in their own fatherhood role and the difference you're seeing now in their children breaking some of these generational cycles, it just tells me how significant this is. So not to put too much heavy weight, as it is obviously significant, but it says to me, we got to deal with these types of things, and we got to help fathers do this because it makes a huge difference.
That's good stuff. It sounds you got, just by your voice and your tonal inflection, you got a lot out of the weekend.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. So what are we going to be chatting about today? We're going to talk about why this conversation matters, the science behind it, then what kids actually need from dads. And then we're going to close it off with some practical strategies and then the legacies that fathers leave. So Drew, let's kick it off with the first point, why this conversation matters.
I think I actually just did that in
Yeah,
our
you
intro,
may have.
right? But let's ground it in other details. A lot of dads, they focus on these external metrics of success. They look at things like financial security, opening doors and providing opportunities to children, which, don't get me wrong, those are important, but they're not the most important. And when we overly focus on those areas, often lead to some, maybe the outcomes that we're not actually looking for. You know, I heard many stories of men, you know, you could use the word posing, right? Posing meaning that, hey, I'm actually wounded, I'm actually hurting, but with this external like perception, I've got money, I've got a car, I've got women, I've got a house, I've got reputation, I've got respect, all these things that they think help validate them. They actually were empty for those men. And so that they were lacking an emotional connectedness to both who they were as well as an emotional connectedness to the people around them, all in the pursuit of like they were trying to fill that emptiness with these external measures. And so the children are the ones who are also significantly impacted, because we are often, as men who are pursuing these external things, not able to be emotionally present and available for our kids. And so, but the kids need that. And many of the men actually talked about not receiving it as children, and what that's why they were pursuing many of the things they were trying to measure up, trying to get the love that they never got as kids. So, you know, it matters because it impacts our kids, and they're consistently watching us. They want to know how do our parents handle pressure? How do they manage conflict? How do they handle difficult feelings like disappointment or rejection, right? Or what happens when we're exhausted, or we're experiencing a lot of anger and significant stress? Ultimately, what kids experience from us through life becomes the pattern that they then begin to repeat. You've got a saying, Ed, that what we emulate, we replicate, right? And so any child, if the only example that they have are their parents in their home, they're going to replicate, good, bad, or otherwise. So, you know, children inherit these emotional habits before they inherit any of these other things that we want to give them.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. And it was interesting. I was going to share that thought. So Drew was reading my alleged mind. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I'm glad he read my alleged mind right this time. But I just want to add, if a father shuts down emotionally, children's may learn avoidance. But if a father manages stress in healthy ways, children learn resilience. So let's move on to our next segment, the science behind it.
Yeah. So ultimately, the simplest way we can say it is science proves that emotional regulation is learned. They are skills, and the most powerful teachers are the adults who we're closely attached to or who we're in close proximity to as we're developing through the early years of our life. We know, in talking with Dr. Stuart Schenker, that, you know, from the ages of 0 to 7, children cannot actually emotionally regulate. They don't have that center of the brain yet. They need an adult or another safe person in their life to actually help co-regulate and teach them how to manage their big emotions. And if they don't learn that in those first 0 to 7 years, you know, then they're learning unhealthy patterns. And it doesn't mean, you know, we know the brains, you know, from can continually rewire themselves. So it's not like it's a foregone conclusion, but it is important in those younger years, in particular for the adults to model that. So, you know, it is co-regulation with their parent, that helps children learn these things at an early age. You can continue to do it as a teenager. So what we have, you know, Sophia is 15, and, you know, she unfortunately didn't get the types of experiences that would help her learn to regulate her emotions at a young age. And so we're doing it with her. We're helping her rewire her brain, and we've seen great progress. She's doing, I think, really well in some respects with regulating, you know, and so it can happen even if it didn't start early on. So, and that idea of having a safe adult is important, because that's how attachment and healthy bonds are formed in young children, right? And so when you have an emotionally present father, and a safe father, then you're able to create secure attachments. And secure attachments tell kids that the world is safe for me, and that if I, let's say, go out and explore, and something happens, and I get scared or I get worried, or it doesn't seem, then I can come back home and know that it's safe, and I have a place to sort of fall back on. And that's crucial to helping people become resilient, to become more stable in the face of difficulties. And that's ultimately what we want to face, because the reality is the world is stressful, and we need to help our children learn how to navigate that stress, even while we might still be learning how to do that ourselves. So yeah, I think, and maybe you can talk, Ed, about what emotionally present fathers contribute to when it comes to children outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a pleasure to. So, three key things, or three out of many key things. First of all, emotionally present fathers contribute to stronger confidence in the family. Also, they contribute to better social development. And then finally, improve emotional resilience. So, stronger confidence, which is very important, better social development. That is key, especially these days when you have so many distractions. Our kids have so many distractions via screens, various different things. Stronger social development is critical more than ever in these times for our young kids. And emotional resilience. Again, you are the dictator as a dad. You're one of the key dictators, along with your partner, if there is one there, in regards to emotional resilience. So it's really important that it's so key that you remember those three areas. Also, kids remember emotional atmosphere more than perfect parenting moments. So, this perfect parent theory, kick it to the curb. Emotional atmosphere is more important than being a perfect parent. And then fathers don't need perfection. They need consistency and emotional presence. So I want to say that again, because I think it's a really key line, that fathers don't need perfection. They need consistency and emotional presence. Let's move on to our third area. What kids actually need from dads. I like that. What they actually need. Drew?
Yeah, I think I would summarize it as they need, most importantly, loving acceptance. They need to know that dad accepts me and loves me for who I am, and regardless of behavior, regardless of what my performance at school or my performance in sports. That's ultimately what they need, right? And so they also need to know that they can share or be the way that they need to be without forms of judgment or ridicule or criticism, right? So that's ultimately what they need. And so to me, they also need a father who can also express his feelings in healthy ways. The common, and I was watching some short clips on on social media of dads just freaking out, like they're trying to change a light bulb, and all it's like, oh, beep 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 beep, like changing the tire and the rotor's stuck, and they're losing it, and it's a joke, it's funny. You're kind of laughing at dad freaking out, losing his what. The problem is that if that's the only thing that they see from you, they're not seeing healthy emotional regulation. Like, anger is anger. It's another emotion, and you just need to learn how to process and communicate that. But there's other ranges of emotion that children need to see from us. If you come home and you've had a hard day, man, I feel really frustrated. Your boss was really not kind to you and had unrealistic expectations. You can actually talk about that. It doesn't mean you lament it. Doesn't mean you whine. Doesn't mean you play victim. You just say, I feel extremely frustrated that I felt like I was treated unfairly when I've been working extremely hard. So it's hard when somebody doesn't recognize the efforts I'm making. Now, it takes awareness. It takes, you have to recognize what is actually going on for you to then be able to communicate that and articulate it in a healthy way. Look, that may not be possible the moment you come in the door. That's why taking time for yourself, taking moments of reflection, or finding ways to take rest. Maybe you need that conversation with your wife or your partner when you come in for about 10-15 minutes to actually process what's going on and where you're actually at. Anyways, we're going off a little bit, but the point is, you need to be available for them and their emotions. And in order to do that, you have to be able to take care of your own emotions, process them, communicate them, become aware of them so that they don't spill out through a reactive process towards your children.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I think that there's not much more that can be added there. Also I can add, breaking generational patterns. So many fathers, and it sounds true that you may have heard some of this on this weekend you were at, grew up hearing man up, don't cry, deal with it. And this episode can challenge outdated emotional experiences. So
Yeah,
strong fathers don't avoid emotions. They teach their children how to navigate them. And there's one other thing it's in my heart to add, but having your children being able to trust you. I think it's so important that if a father can have his child or children, the building that bond of trust is so, so important. And I feel it ties in with all these things here, but building trust between yourself and your child or children is so, so important. Drew, anything you want to add on before we move on to our last segment?
I agree wholeheartedly. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship. And if you don't have it, then you need to find ways to get it. And to back to your point about man up, don't cry, deal with it, suck it up, whatever. The reality is if you think about you experience that, uh, I'm going to use a short, simple analogy. So a pressure cooker, right? Every one of those expectations of man up, suppress, basically you don't let the pressure out. And a pressure cooker over time, if the pressure continues to build and build and build, ultimately it'll just blow up, right? And so without healthy release valves, the pressure becomes, too much. It overcooks your food, or worse, it wrecks the inside of the appliance, or worse, it actually explodes out. It actually explodes out, creating significant damage, right? And so that's what happens when we just continually ask either ourselves or our children to not be able to process and release some of the pressure that's built up from these big emotions that are real, that have a negative impact. The reason we have mental health issues is because there's so much inability to process our emotions in healthy ways. You can call it mental illness, but the reality is it's emotional unwellness. It's emotional illness because you're denying, suppressing, refusing, like medicating, all these other things, instead of dealing with the truth. Is we are human beings. We have both logic, reasoning, and emotions, and you can't separate them. You have to be able to process them, and if you don't, those emotions, I've referenced this before. There's a great book. I mean, I read it like 20, I didn't read it, but I've heard about it 20 plus years ago, called Toxic Emotions. And this is from a medical doctor who, upon years of reflection at their practice, had observed the real issue is the emotions that are never undealt with, that are contributing to these long-term chronic illnesses that are taking people's lives and destroying their health, because they're not dealing with the emotions. That was the premise of the book. So I know I've gone off a bit, but to me, this is crucial and why it's so important. It's not just our relationships. It's not just what the future is for kids. It's our overall health and well-being. And if this is the month that we're talking about men's health, we have to talk about the reality of what's truly impacting men's health. And this is a major one.
All right, next segment, practical strategies for dads or fathers. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, so something simple, and we'll alternate it. First one is just create small daily check-ins. They can be moments, they can be rituals, they can be regular practices, whatever it is. It could be just for yourself. And you shared this story many times of the dad who came home and just took 5 minutes in the car for himself before he ever set foot into the house, right? Or you could have a regular check-in with a friend or accountability partner or anyone else, where it might simply be a text. Hey, checking in today. This is what my focus is today. Okay, great. Simple check-in. It could be a daily check-in with your spouse, right? At the end of the day, you just take 10 minutes together and you simply ask questions. How was your day? What was challenging? What do you feel positive about? 3 simple questions, 10 minutes. You listen without interrupting to each other. That's a simple check-in. You know what? It could just be your own check-in, right? You start the morning with, okay, how am I feeling about the day? And what's one thing I want to focus on throughout the day? Doesn't matter. Just do it. You get the point. Over to you, Ed.
Yeah, let's go to let your kids see you healthy coping. And I know some dads are going to go, what do you mean healthy coping? Well, let me give you some practical examples of healthy coping: taking walks, deep breathing, talking things through, exercising, asking for help. And with some of the suggestions I've just provided, if you can incorporate your child or children in those things, even the better. So, taking walks with your kids, practicing deep breathing with your kids, talking things through, exercising, asking for help, all these things, if you're able, yes, it all starts with you as a dad. Absolutely. But if there is ways you can incorporate any of these activities or activities like this with your child or children, even the better. Even the better. They're seeing you doing it and they're experiencing you doing it. Cannot go wrong with that. So, and I know there are dads in my neighborhood that take walks with their kids. One gentleman in particular, almost every evening after he comes home from work, he takes a walk with his partner and his child. And they've been doing it for years. They walk the neighborhood with their dog. So the key thing is pick one thing and start from there. Drew?
You have to prioritize your own mental well-being, whether that is getting help from a therapist, a counselor, a coach, doesn't matter. You could be part of a men's group that meets regularly. You could also just prioritize rest. A lot of us are go, 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 next, 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 more, 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 without actually taking time to pause. And that is important. Making sure that you still have good connections with your friends, either, close friends that you've had for a long time, you're staying connected, or you're building new friendships that add value to you, as well as having healthy boundaries between work and home or other demands that are in your life. Sometimes I see this a lot. People who are connected to a church or a faith-based community often like they struggle to have boundaries there, and it actually wrecks most of the other parts of their life because they aren't able to learn how to gracefully say, I'm sorry, but I just can't do that right now, or essentially no. And so it's important to recognize, are you truly taking care of the elements of your own health to help you be able to show up? Because the most important leadership role you have is in your home.
100%. 100%. Absolutely. And then finally, in this segment, repair quickly after emotional mistakes. Apologizing teaches accountability and emotional maturity. And the power in two words, I'm sorry, and it's meant with the right intent, is so powerful. Two small words, but two big words in my vocabulary. Saying you're sorry teaches that accountability and emotional maturity. Anything you want to add in regards to that, Drew, in regards to apologizing piece?
So important. It is one of the most powerful things you can do. And if you did nothing else of what we said today to help with the emotional climate in your home, it would be to do that on a consistent basis. If you make mistakes, which we all will, repair. Humble yourself, acknowledge you messed up and may have hurt someone, and ask forgiveness, and then receive that. Forgive yourself, and then just
Yes.
re-engage in a healthier way.
Yeah, really key. Nice point there, Drew, forgiving yourself first. So that's what we covered. Wrap up today. So we talked about why this conversation matters. We talked about the science behind it. We then jumped on to what kids actually need from dads. And we provided some practical strategies for fathers. So I'm going to just do a little bit of a closing segment. So many fathers worry, am I doing enough? Am I getting this right? But children often remember safety, emotional presence, calm during chaos, feeling heard, feeling loved. So, what emotional habits are your children learning from the way you live today? So, main takeaways that we have today: children learn more from emotional habits from watching their parents. Also, a father's mental well being directly affects a child's resilience and emotional security. Then we have kids need emotional presence more than perfection. Remember, presence more than perfection. Then healthy coping strategies become lifelong lessons for children. Then we have repairing mistakes builds trust and emotional maturity. And then repairing mistakes build trust and emotional maturity. I said that already. And prioritizing mental health is an investment in future generations. So, Drew, what resource do we have for our family today?
Well, The reality is that when we try to do fatherhood alone, we often stumble, we fall, we make mistakes, and sometimes we beat ourselves up, and it doesn't help. But having support around you, having a community of other men who understand what it's like to be really in the trenches of fatherhood, but also can guide you, that have resources that have been created by those who worked with men and fathers for years, as well as fathers themselves. That is our resource, and that's our dad mentor, the father leader community. So I will include a link. We encourage you to explore and consider jumping into our father leader community to get the support that you need to be the dad you want to be.
Wonderful. So, final message and a call to action here. Final message: your mental health doesn't just affect you, it shapes the emotional future of your family. And every small step you take toward well being becomes part of your child's foundation. So, if this episode made you reflect on the kind of emotional example you're setting at home, share it with another dad who needs this reminder, because healthier fathers help raise healthier kids. So, as always, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the most important thing, your time, to share with us. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll chat with you soon. Be well.